See, you try doing that, you look like a muppet, don't you? Some sort of psycho. It's not listening at all, it's talking. The most important skill in communication is the one that we all come to Toastmasters to learn. It's talking. We don't have a crisis of listening in the corporate world, we have a crisis of self-expression. People can't actually say what they mean. They can't mount an argument. They can't tell a story. That's the problem. Does anyone know why listening is important? It's actually a biological reason. We talk, on average, most of us, at between 100 and 150 words a minute, there or thereabouts. We can hear at between 600 and 800 words a minute. That's why you walk into a room at a party, you can pick up 3 or 4 conversations going on at once and know roughly what's happening. So the natural default for the brain, because it's so clever, is to not really pay attention. I've got the gist of it. No worries, I'll read the paper. That's why we teach listening skills, to teach you to focus your listening, because your brain doesn't do that by default. But it's not actually the most important skill. The other reason that I don't like people saying that is because it implies that the responsibility for being understood is on the shoulders of the listener, and that's rubbish. It is always the communicator who has that responsibility. Always. But we're only 50% there. What else? What's missing? Rapport? No, not necessary.
Honesty?
Honesty? No, definitely not necessary. Otherwise half the advertising industry would be dead, wouldn't it?
Communication?
Communication. Yeah, well, the definition of effective communication. Now stop for a minute. Right? Think about this. Think about what you're yelling out here. Someone said honesty, someone said clarity, someone said, a few other things, being articulate, and so on and so forth. Who decides whether or not communication is effective? The listener. Yeah. So why are you telling me stuff you have to do? Not relevant, is it? It's stuff the listener has to get or do that decides whether or not it's effective. So what would the listener have to be doing? What do you guys have to do right now while I'm crapping on?
Comprehend.
Interested. Go further. It's got to be more than that. Buy into it, which is about... They have to agree. They actually have to agree with what you're saying. Or at the very least agree with your right to say it. But more typically agree with what you're saying. What's missing though? There's still another factor here. No? No?
Give the customer what they want.
God, no. Why on earth would you do that? You don't work in banking, do you? Sorry? No, not change.
Comprehend.
They have to care. They have to understand, they have to agree, they have to care, and then as a result of all that, they have to take action. Now you think about this for a minute. How do we judge whether or not communication is effective for people? Whether or not they do what we want them to do, right? If someone doesn't do what you wanted them to do, it will always, without exception, be because they either didn't understand, didn't agree, or didn't care. There are no other options. That's it. Just knowing that will change the way you talk to people. It will mean that if something doesn't go right, you know where to go looking for the problem. Murray's looking quizzically at me. Trust me, Murray, there are no other options, and we'll always fall into one of those. Either they don't get it, they don't agree, or they don't give a toss. And we tend to make 4 fatal assumptions when we're talking to people. We assume that they understand what we said. We assume that they think we're right. We tend to assume that they give a toss. And we assume that they're going to do something appropriate as a result. And more often than not, none of these things occur. And the corporate world, and virtually everyone in this room until now, didn't know that that is what effective communication actually is. And as soon as you know that, it doesn't mean you get it right first time. It means you've got a better chance of getting it right second time. You can figure out where you've gone wrong. Because as the communicator, it's always going to be you that's gone wrong. Go back and say, right, I either need to explain this in a different way, I need to mount a better argument, or I need to find something they do care about it and relate it back to that. To a certain extent, the ladies in the room get this. Women do get it. What's the most common complaint women have about their male partners? They don't understand me. Look, can I clear this up? Speaking on behalf of the male organisation, and trust me, we are the foremost authority on women today. Wherever there is a woman, we have a man on the job. Granted, he may not be our best man, but he's there. We do understand you. We understand you perfectly. We get it. We always have. We just don't give a shit. Seriously, it is always about these things. So the rest of it, structurally, is how do you go about achieving these things? How do you get understanding? How do you get agreement? How do you get people to care? How do you get people to do stuff as a result? And that's the crux of it. And in order to do that, you have to understand how the human brain works and how it interprets and evaluates information. Now, I'm going to probably upset some people. There are a lot of things that we get taught in communication that we think we know about communication that are just not true. Left brain, right brain. Not true. I know, it comes as a shock. Fundamentally, not true. No scientific basis whatsoever. It started off in the early 1880s when they first decided to dissect some brains, human brains. And they discovered that it appeared that certain functions of the human brain seem to be located in certain hemispheres. For example, they thought that the speech function was in the left hemisphere. This is the equivalent of gathering together 200 people who happen to be right-handed and saying that the world is right-handed. In actual fact, not everyone's functions are in the same parts of the brain. They're spread out. Some people have them in different parts of the brain. More to the point, the brain does not work as a left side and a right side. It doesn't operate that way. How do we know that? A little thing called MRI technology. We can actually map your brain while you're doing stuff. And we shove you in the MRI machine, we get you to complete a task, and what we discover, lo and behold, it's not left brain, right brain, it's a whole brain. Cal surprise. And the whole brain works together. And even though certain functions may be located in certain hemispheres of the brain, they have to work together in order to function. When you talk, it's not just your speech function that goes off, is it? It's 3 or 4 other things at the same time as you're processing cognitively. So it's actually your whole brain working together. So all the left brain, right brain stuff that you thought you knew over the years is actually not true. All that stuff that they assigned in terms of right being creative and all that kind of thing, the left being logical, not true. That bit isn't actually even based on dissection. They just made that up. Seriously. Made up. It's based on astrology. So if you think your brain works the same way as the horoscopes in the daily paper, sure, go for it. Most things based on left brain, right brain are not true as well, which includes most types of personality testing. Anyway, that's an aside. In reality, the brain works together. And in terms of interpreting and evaluating information, it looks for 3 things. Very, very simply. Facts, emotions, and symbols. And because it's looking for all 3 things, that means that whenever you're communicating with someone, you have to use all 3 channels of communication. Factual, emotional, and symbolic. So think about this for a moment. What would the factual channel be? What sort of things would you expect to see? It's not a trick question. Sorry? Yeah, data, information. We love this stuff. Seriously, we love it. We are hardwired to think this way. You cannot leave this stuff out. This is why we see faces in clouds. There are no faces in clouds. We're looking for a pattern, and we find it wherever we look. What's the lesson from that? For God's sake, provide the pattern, otherwise I'll make one up. And you will. You can't help yourself. You have to do it. What's the big problem with the corporate world? What are they over-reliant on? Facts, data, information. They just keep dumping it on over and over again. Can you retain that? No. Why can't you retain that? because they don't provide context, which means what? You don't care. And you probably don't understand. And you may not agree. See how quickly this starts relating back? That factual channel is not about telling people what stuff is. I don't need you for that. I can look it up on my own. That's what Google is for. You have to tell me what it means. It's all about context. Tell me what stuff means. Don't tell me what stuff is. You understand the difference? Because we have this tendency to just want to share all this stuff with people. Because in each and every role that you have, no matter where it is, you are an expert in your own little field. So to you, everything's important. And you have this tendency to want to dump all that information onto people, but it's not important to them. Only certain parts of it are. And if you don't explain the context to them, then they don't know why it's important. And if you don't cherry pick the key bits of information, they can't retain it. So that factual channel is vitally important for that reason. The next one is the emotional channel. What's that about? It's easy. Feelings, yes. Two types of feelings. The feelings of the people that you're talking to and your own. You must acknowledge the feelings of the people you're talking to because that allows you to connect with them. Because they think, oh, he gets it. Or she gets it. She understands me. They know what I'm about. So, for example, in a certain environment, it might be that they've had a tough year, the global financial crisis. Those of you who are working in corporate environments, if you're addressing the troops, probably be a good idea to acknowledge that things have been tough. Because it shows you understanding. It's very simple. It's not difficult to do. But what are we taught to do in the corporate world? Don't show emotion. This is dopey. Because you also have to share how you feel about things. Because that allows people to connect with you. If you don't do that, you run into a very, very big problem. And it's this. Every person that ever comes into contact with you knows that you are a close approximation of a human being. Trust me. They therefore know that you have feelings. If you try to hide your feelings from them, they will attribute emotion to you. They will try to guess at what you're feeling. What are the chances that that will be a positive thing? Give you a clue, it's a round figure. 0. None. They're going to assume one of three things. Either A, you do not care. B, you're up to something, sneaky or malicious. Or C, both A and B. And then they will respond in one of only two ways that human beings respond in that situation. If you are lucky, and I stress, if you are lucky, they will simply disengage completely. Does anyone know what the disengagement figures are for the workforce? 55% of the workforce are disengaged. For those of you doing the math, going, woohoo, 45% are on our side. No, they're not. There's a further 19% that are actively disengaged. In other words, sabotaging the place. We are paying these people to hate us. In the case of the actively disengaged, we are paying them to prove they're justified in hating us. This is the way people are. So they simply disengage, they pull back. That's if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, they pursue you to the ends of the earth because they've decided you are the biggest bastard on the planet and someone needs to make an example of it. Now, a really high-profile example of this in recent times is the James Hardie case in Australia. Remember the asbestos poisoning? Right. So James Hardie, in response to that, they had a whole bunch of workers in the 50s exposed to asbestos, ended up with various asbestos-related terminal diseases. So they see the crisis and they troop out the suits, out the cut. And they take a classic corporate approach. We're going to be logical, cool, calm, collected. We're not going to get emotional. We're not going to be hysterical. We're going to deal with the facts. And out they come. And on the other side of the fence, who is it? Bernie Banton. Bernie is a 70-something-year-old granddad. Bernie's got an oxygen tank inserted into his nostrils. Bernie's dying. Bernie is, in fact, a dead man. It's just a question of how long. So we know that Bernie's not doing it for him, because Bernie ain't going to be around to collect anything. Bernie's doing it for everyone else. Bernie's surrounded by friends and family. They're crying, they're upset, they're emotional. Who does the public side with?